If we don't fix dating, we're all going to die. For systems constrained by entropy, ever cursed the decay, self-perpetuation is the most important task to solve. This is self-evident because if a system can't persist into the future, then it ceases to exist and fades into irrelevance. For civilization at the macro level, and for humans at the micro level, self-perpetuation occurs through reproduction. To perpetuate, society needs babies to be conceived, birthed, and raised into productive members. These productive members then have to grow food, keep water flowing, generate electricity, and so forth to keep everyone else alive. Dating is how this whole process starts. It's the first step, and without it, all subsequent steps fail. Sure, it's possible to generate the required number of babies through various other methods. The Giver by Lois Lowry has its birthing mothers method. In Artificial Soulmates, I used birthing pods, which we also saw in The Matrix. Harems were apparently a thing in the past too. Ultimately, from an economic standpoint, and certainly a moral one, all these methods are inferior to a long-term monogamous pair bond between one man and one woman that results in a nuclear family being created with the birth of their first offspring. This optimizes for the resource requirements of properly raising and indoctrinating a child to be a productive member of society. Dating is the process we use for family formation. And in its current state, it's broken, and if we don't fix it soon, we're going to be lucky to have a bunch of suboptimal, damaged children running around wreaking havoc on civilization. If we're less lucky, there just won't be kids, and we'll have to hope the robots save us. So the question is, what is dating even for? One way to look at life is as a series of problems in need of solutions. The problems addressed by dating are the multitude of problems associated with reproduction. Thanks to biology, women are placed in a vulnerable state during the reproduction process. It's objectively true that life, as pregnancy progresses and after a baby is born, is increasingly difficult. The difficulty doesn't diminish until the baby reaches self-sufficiency, which typically doesn't happen until 12 years down the road at the earliest. In the majority of cases, children rely on their parents to some degree or another well into their 20s. Although it's technically possible for a woman to pull off independent parenting, it's exceedingly difficult and practically impossible. At the very least, help has to come from kin. Naturally, it follows that since it takes a male and a female to make a baby, the male who contributed the genetic information required to begin the manufacturing process should also play a role in providing the necessary support to make having the baby practically possible, rather than just technically possible. From the female perspective, the purpose of dating is to find a male partner who has desirable genetic traits as well as the requisite amount of character to ensure he sticks around and assists in raising their offspring. From the male perspective, the purpose of dating is to find a female partner who has desirable genetic traits as well as the requisite amount of character to ensure she sticks around and exclusively invests in their offspring. This is the purpose of dating. It's supposed to be an evaluation process. Both parties engaging in dating are supposed to be attempting to evaluate each other for suitability as long-term partners and mates. The shorter the process, the better. It should only last as long as required to complete the evaluation. Let's talk about evaluation processes. If we recognize dating for what it's supposed to be, we can compare it to other similar processes. Interviewing candidates for a job would be a good analogy. In this sense, it's amusing how many individuals have complained about modern dating feeling like a job interview. These complainers are completely missing the point in the severity of dating. When interviewing a candidate for a role, the contract you normally enter into is much less demanding than a marriage contract. Obligations are often shorter and less all-encompassing. Many states have at-will employment, which means that the employer or employee can end employment at will for any reason without financial repercussions. That makes most jobs less of a binding agreement than a typical marriage. So it's amusing that most people in roles responsible for hiring take their jobs more seriously than they take dating. I've met several boss babes who would never even consider hiring the man they were actively sleeping with for a full-time role. The role of husband or wife is certainly much more important than the role of engineer 2 or marketing manager. Granting that dating is an evaluation process, the goal is to obtain enough high-quality information as quickly as possible to make a good decision. As with interviewing for a job, for dating, the hiring parties are mutually seeking the most qualified candidate they can obtain for the smallest amount of compensation. This sets the stage for taking a look at how cooked we are. Let's talk about evaluations. The concept of signal and noise is helpful here. A successful evaluation is a high signal, low noise evaluation. For those not familiar with this terminology, signal is the information you want. Noise is the information that's irrelevant to the decision-making process. For example, if hiring a bank manager, a discussion about a history of white-collar crime would be signal, whereas a lengthy discussion about a woodworking hobby would be noise. In the context of dating, the signal you're trying to find includes three main things: long-term fitness, genetic fitness, and compatibility. Let's take a look at each of these. On the long-term fitness front, long-term fitness consists of character, resource provisioning, exclusivity, and parenting inclination. Character is most important and encompasses traits like conscientiousness, agreeableness, and emotional stability. Conscientiousness is the quality of wishing to do one's work or duty well and thoroughly. This is useful in a relationship context because it means a partner that is high in conscientiousness is likely to show up and be there for you when the going gets tough. Agreeableness is a person's tendency to be compassionate, cooperative, trusting, and kind, rather than suspicious or antagonistic. Although agreeableness can get you trampled when dealing with bad actors or outgroups, in the context of a relationship, it is indicative of peace and harmony. A high agreeableness person is likely to sacrifice for the sake of a relationship, which is good for long-term prospects. Emotional stability speaks for itself. It's helpful to be able to sleep at night without fear of your partner stabbing you in the chest. In social contexts, an even temper with low volatility is usually advantageous, as explosive and violent reactions are seldom beneficial. The desirability of resource provisioning is easy enough to understand as well. Existing requires resources. The ability to acquire and manage resources is imperative for continued survival. Exclusivity is another easy concept. If your partner is exchanging resources with entities outside the relationship, it always comes at the cost of the relationship. The cost can vary, but the net effect is diminishing the relationship. For example, if one partner is seeing someone else on the side, that's time, energy, and resources that should be going to the relationship that are instead being diverted to the outside party. This is unfair and undesirable to the party that is being faithful to the relationship. Lastly, we have parenting inclination. Misalignment on a desire for children or how children will be raised can destroy a relationship. If one party wants kids and the other does not, we have a pretty major impasse that can't really be remedied. Taken together, character, provision, exclusivity, and parenting set the tone for the long-term trajectory of a relationship. That brings us to genetic fitness. On the genetic fitness front, we have health, symmetry, and vitality. Health is desirable because without it, a relationship is seriously impaired. This is built into us at the deepest level, and it's why individuals who are sickly end up taking on an unattractive aura. Symmetry is desirable because from symmetry we derive a lot of our sense of beauty. We can see this in nature as well as in ourselves, and in what we decide to build. It's almost unheard of to encounter a building or a project that's not symmetrical. Then there's vitality. This is the essence of being alive. It's that dynamic, energetic, outgoing essence of living. It's deeply attractive because the first thing to go when health starts to deteriorate happens to be vitality. Low vitality is associated with the sick and the aged. Taken together, these three dominate the physical side of attraction. You can add a bunch of variations, such as blue eyes or blonde hair, but these ancillary features are nothing more than decorations on the underlying structure of health, symmetry, and vitality. This brings us to compatibility. Compatibility boils down to shared values, conflict resolution styles, and time orientation. Shared values are the big things like religion, integrity, politics, right and wrong, and the importance of family. Religion often informs downstream decisions, so a difference there can be disastrous. Integrity can cause issues if one party has a lower standard of integrity than the other. Politics is self-explanatory at this point in the game. Then there is family importance. If one party wants to stay close to family and the other wants to move abroad, the potential for great conflict exists with no clear resolution. On the topic of conflict is inevitable in a relationship. The only way to have a relationship without conflict is for one party to completely allow the other party to walk over them in all things. This is problematic, so there will be conflict, and when it occurs, it needs to be dealt with rationally and constructively. If one party has a tendency to explode, and the other party has a tendency to withdraw, little progress will be made toward resolution. Then there's time orientation. If one party is future-oriented and the other party is present-oriented, they'll both be pulling against each other continually. The present-oriented member of the relationship will want to do this and that right now, potentially at the detriment of the future. Meanwhile, the future-oriented member will want to sacrifice the present for a better future that might never actually arrive. Misalignment here will create continuous conflict that further enhances the importance of conflict resolution. Alignment with these three facets of compatibility enhances a relationship immensely. Now let's talk about evaluating our signals. Now that we've spent time on our signals and what we're looking for, how does modern dating go wrong? First, we have the prolonged talking phase, which is an attempt at getting a signal, but which usually just results in a bunch of noise because everyone is always afraid to cut to the deep and meaningful questions. Then we have situationships, which are like hiring someone out for contract work, but reserving the right to fire them the second a better contractor comes along. On the apps, we have curated profiles that flex noisy information that obscures the signal we're actually looking for. The focus is on photos, height, and status symbols. Character and everything else we need for long-term success are usually left out. Lastly, we have the endless optionality that delays commitment. Why settle for one person when the next swipe might have someone who's 10 times better? Our current dating situation makes a complete mess of extracting the signal from the noise. Short evaluations would be much better because the longer things drag on, the higher the opportunity cost and the more damaged the pair boundary mechanism becomes. Focused investment is better than diluted attention. Modern dating gives us diluted attention. The same holds for job interviews. Every candidate interviewed and every round of interviews held costs time and money that could be spent on more productive aspects of the business. So how cooked are we? Well, we're pretty cooked. Our global total fertility rate has fallen to the 2.2 to 2.3 range, with most developed nations well below the 2.1 replacement rate. South Korea is currently winning the race to the bottom with a 0.7 to a 0.8 rate. There's some evidence of a slight rebound, but it's still too soon to tell if this is a lasting trend. Europe and East Asia are in the 1 to 1.6 range, and the US is hovering at around 1.6. As of now, projections show a continued decline. So that's not good on the civilization perpetuation front. Many young adults report no dating activity. Numbers range from 60 to 70% depending on the survey. This means that only around a third of young adults are even trying to date. Surveys say that many want serious relationships but simply can't handle the waves and waves of BS required to get one. A lot of people are lonely. Naturally, all of this is leading to delayed family formation. I'm 30 and still unmarried despite persistent efforts. In developed countries, the age of first marriage is in the 28 to 30 year age range. First births follow that, which doesn't help the fertility rate. Based on marriage rates, it's looking like a significant portion of young people may just never marry. So what's driving this disaster? Well, tech and apps have turned dating into a game. Players have infinite options. Every new swipe and match is a quick dopamine hit. These quick hits favor appearance and superficiality over deep or meaningful evaluation. They're not successful, and they're often used for meaningless sex, which further fries the dopamine circuits. Then there's the economy in our wonderful culture. The economy sucks. People in general and girls specifically struggle to accept a quality of life that's lower than what they grew up with. In the 2000s, the median household income in the US was $42K. Adjusted for inflation, today that should be about $81K. In actual practice, it's around $83. So what gives? Shouldn't things be better than they were? Well, no. Unfortunately, the things that get baked into the quality of life have increased in cost a lot faster than simple inflation in wages. College education, vehicles, vacation, and housing have all gotten much more expensive, whereas TVs, computers, and other consumer goods have gotten cheaper. The former drives status, the latter does not. Moreover, careers are now more of a priority than ever before. This is especially true for women. We have declining societal trust, the ongoing gender wars, rape culture propaganda, and a social fabric that has been torn asunder. There used to be rules for how courtship was supposed to work that both sexes could follow. Now anything goes, and good luck figuring it out. Lastly, with the whole Me Too movement, clumsy interactions that are common among inexperienced parties in the courtship process were elevated from being awkward to being microaggressions and sometimes outright sexual harassment or assault. This cultural change creates a massive disincentive for male-led relationship initiation. Adding to the mix is the incentive mismatch. Across all levels of analysis, our incentive structures are now completely out of alignment. The abundance of short-term option reduces the urgency for commitments. Welfare undermines the male provisioning role inefficiently. Instead of money flowing from a man to his family, think man $100 family, that money is taxed, some is lost at the governmental level before it finally makes it to the mother and child level. So think man $100 government, $99 to $92, and then finally mother and child. Not to mention the issues that arise from not having both male and female role models during childhood. Then there's sex differences. Because of biology, the female imperative is commitment and resource acquisition in a long-term mating context. Men, on the other hand, are more interested in fertility cues and casual access. When there isn't alignment between these interests, both sides end up compromising from mutually beneficial arrangements to arrangements that are harmful for both, such as prolonged situationships. To restate what I stated at the beginning of this article, a society that can't efficiently solve the reproduction problem risks decay. The decay takes the form of aging populations, strained economies, and cultural stagnation. The copium to this problem is a reliance on immigration and automation, both of which erodes social values and cohesion. So how do we fix this mess? Since dating is an evaluation process, we can use the same methods we'd use to fix any evaluation process. We want to improve signal quality by ensuring the important information gets through and is clear. We want to reduce noise and friction by using stronger filters that screen out the riffraff. We want to shorten timelines when possible because prolonged evaluation seldom reveals useful signal and instead generates more noise. Lastly, we want to realign incentives towards long-term success. The internet is full of utopian fixes, but very few of these are actually realistic. Most are more likely than not to make matters worse when the second and third order consequences are considered. This is what I would recommend. First and foremost, courtship norms need to be reestablished. Dating needs to be intentional with defined timelines, and parental and social involvement where feasible. Dating should be prohibited for teenagers entirely if marriage isn't on the table. Once marriage is on the table, a relationship should be limited to 6 months maximum, with a focus on discovering signal and filtering noise. Relationships that have a mandatory holding period built in, such as long distance or waiting to finish college or waiting to finish high school or whatever crap you might come up with, these relationships should be avoided entirely. These sorts of relationships simply waste time and energy. Parents should act as a secondary screening mechanism. They should be looking for red flags that a person in the throes of romance might overlook. Sex and other intimacy should be strictly off limits because it interferes with the signal. Intimacy in general can make a bad relationship seem good while the sex lasts. As soon as a marriage occurs and the sex stops, the underlying faults that were there all along tend to be revealed with disastrous consequences. As a society, we need to promote environments that allow organic meetings. Apps have demonstrated that they can't be trusted to provide a public service. We need to make it okay for a man to approach a woman in reasonable settings. It should be okay to approach a woman at a bar, at a gym, in a mall, at a store, at work, at a coffee shop, at a restaurant, at a church, pretty much anywhere. The protocol should be as follows. Male: hey, I find you to be attractive. Could I get your number and maybe take you on a date sometime? Female: sure, it would be my pleasure. Or male: hey, I find you to be attractive. Could I get your number and maybe take you on a date sometime? Female: I'm sorry, but I'm not interested. I appreciate your courage and your interest, though. Good luck next time. The female should not tell anyone about this interaction. This especially includes social media. Every time a woman tries to gain clout by touting rejected guys, the number of guys willing to shoot their shot decreases. Women who do this are essentially extracting clout at the cost of our social fabric. If the social fabric deteriorates too much, we lose all trust in each other. Once the trust is gone, crime rises. Then the very women shaming guys for social media clout will be the ones complaining about how afraid they are to go outside because of all the mean people. Lastly, at a societal level, we need a signaling mechanism that allows singles to easily identify each other. Back in the day, when the interval between dating and marriage was small, wedding rings served this purpose. Some similar social institution would go a long way toward increasing approach frequency. As far as the economy is concerned, free market solutions are best. Getting the government out of marriage entirely would go a long way towards resolving issues. Divorce law needs to be reformed to ensure equal rights for both parents. We need to set up an incentive structure to promote lasting marriages. If one party benefits more than the other from breaking a contract, then how can we expect the contract to stand? The default should be equal custody. The definition of abuse needs to be clearly defined, and evidence needs to be presented. No-fault divorce needs to be eliminated. Assets existing before marriage remain under the pre-marriage party control. Assets generated during the marriage are split 50-50. This creates a system where pre-existing assets can act as an incentive to keep marriages together. DEI needs to be eliminated. Females have consistently demonstrated higher status mate preference. As artificial equality has been enforced, they have not demonstrated a willingness to date down. A reversion to meritocracy fixes this. Lastly, government immigration policies and zoning at the local levels are the key drivers for housing shortages. Cutting immigration and abolishing zoning should allow more single-family homes to be built, which should drive down the overall cost of housing. Apps and online dating platforms need to be redesigned for a serious relationship evaluation focus. Reported values need to be verified. There should be background checks and matching based on goals. Speed dating formats might be effective. AI-assisted compatibility screening, but with human oversight, might also be promising. There needs to be cultural pushback against the gamification of dating apps. Treating people like expendable commodities is unacceptable. All of these suggestions add costs, but I think most people would be willing to pay for them if there is a guarantee of results. When you consider the cost of a divorce and how important a relationship is, paying several grand to find a partner is actually reasonable. When interviewing candidates for an engineering role, it's not uncommon to spend somewhere between $8K and $28K, depending on the seniority of the position. I think the role of a partner is much more important than a run-of-the-mill engineering role. Time to start wrapping up. With all of these things, there are always trade-offs. Not everyone will pair bond successfully in a high-choice environment like the one that I'm describing above. Some guys at the top want their harem, damn the consequences. Some girls want to experience everything life has to offer. These people will exist, and we have to accept that. But they should be minimized as much as possible for the sake of society. Some people will opt out or find alternatives. This can't be helped. So our aim has to be toward optimizing the default to be a preference for stable nuclear families. The goal is to maximize child outcomes and social resilience. The vast majority of the evidence indicates that committed two-parent households generally produce better results on average for resource investment and indoctrination into productive norms. This has to be the case if we want society to persist. Dating isn't supposed to be fun, contrary to how many people treat it. Dating is the gatekeeper to civilization continuity. If we treat it like the serious evaluation that it is, more serious than most job hires, we can improve the odds of success. If we choose not to do this, entropy wins. Then all we can hope for is immigrants, pods, or benevolent robots to solve the problem suboptimally.